Okay. Good evening. I would like to call to order the January 24th, 2022 Lake Washington School Board meeting. Let the record reflect that all board members are present and participating remotely. Under the guidelines for attending public board meetings that are in Proclamation 20-28.15, the Open Public Meetings Act and the Public Records Act, there remains a prohibition on in-person public meetings, but an exception for those meetings that can comply with the guidelines for business meetings found in the miscellaneous venues guidance. That guidance provides that board meetings may be held in person with no restrictions on capacity and no physical distance requirements, but all face covering requirements must be met. The board values public participation and engagement in our meetings, and we will continue to comply with all laws, including the Open Public Meetings Act and all emergency requirements related to miscellaneous venues and COVID-19. If that guidance and the requirements cannot be met, the board must hold its meetings remotely and provide access via live stream and audio. Due to non-compliance at board meetings and concerns of continued non-compliance, the board has determined to hold its meetings remotely. The board will notify the public of the locations of its meetings in the board meetings tab through the meetings tab on board docs on the LWSD website. So that's www.lwsd.org. And then there's a link to board docs and a meetings tab available. It's under the board tab on the website. At this time, it is planned that all board meetings scheduled in January and February will be held remotely unless there are changes in the guidance provided. All board meetings will continue to be live streamed on the district's website. If community members are unable to live stream the meeting, you may call to listen. That number is 425-936-2813. Conference ID is 37127. Okay, I will now entertain a motion to approve the agenda for the January 24th, 2022 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Bleasner, seconded by Director Carlson, that we approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, hearing none, the motion carries. Okay, the first item on the agenda tonight is a recognition that Dr. Holman forced me to put on the agenda. Dr. Holman, could you please lead us through that?
Absolutely. And as I said when we were planning the agenda, this is one item that I got to put on the agenda and you couldn't veto. So January is School Board Recognition Month. And so tonight just want to spend a couple of minutes recognizing this body and appreciate you for your service to your community, to the school district, and ultimately to the students that we're all serving. And so when we think about school board governance, it truly is service. You think about the last 2 years of boardsmanship, and it has been some of the most challenging and difficult work that I'm sure any of you have experienced, and I believe we have navigated this pretty well. And so I want to express my appreciation because at the end of the day, students' lives are affected by the work and the governance that you provide to this school district and this community. It's important to note that board members are elected. And so every 4 years, their term expires and they're on the ballot and they have to work for their seat. And so I want to appreciate that. It's also a non-salaried position. And so the volunteer aspect of this also is a unique piece around board service. And so you all know this, but it's important for the community to know everything that the board does. And this is just a short, very overarching list. When you think about, you really are the stewards of the vision of the school district. We just had a study session where the board asked a lot of visioning type questions to ensure that the school district is responsive as we continue to work towards those outcomes for kids. The board is a policy governance board, and so you have written policies that guide your work, your decisions, and your operating principles. You hire and evaluate one individual, and that's the superintendent. You do oversee employment processes for all of the other employees in the school district through a very specific set of policies. You monitor and evaluate the financial health and well-being of the district through your policy structures. And when you think about your communication, transparency, all of that work that goes into ensuring that you're building trust and support among all of your constituents, that is truly a significant effort. And then the work of acting as a governance body. It isn't one voice, it's 5 individuals working together to make decisions and take action on specific information. And so again, this year, want to recognize you as board members, and so we will get a set of books out to you to be able to select. We want to continue to honor you within our school libraries. We've done this in the past. I think it's a nice way to recognize you as you are recognized within our school libraries. And so want to make sure that we get a list out to you to either select, or you can choose a book of your own choosing at the elementary, middle school, and high school level, with a placard that will go in that recognizing you at that school. And so along with this, this set of information, also want to read the proclamation that Governor Inslee put forward in late December. And so this is a proclamation of the state of Washington, and it says, whereas the mission of Washington's public school system is to assure that all students achieve at high levels and possess the knowledge and skills to be responsible members of a democratic society who enjoy productive and satisfying lives. And whereas Washington's 295 locally elected school boards and 9 elected educational service district boards are the core of public education governance system in our state. And whereas the districts and regions they lead serve more than 1 million students, have a combined annual budget of over $15 billion, and employ approximately 120,000 people. And whereas school directors play a crucial role in promoting student learning and achievement by creating a vision, establishing policies and budgets, and setting clear standards of accountability for all involved. And whereas school directors are directly accountable to the residents in their districts and regions, serving as a vital link between members of the community and their schools. And whereas school directors and educational service districts provide a passionate voice of advocacy for public schools and the welfare of school children. And whereas it is appropriate to recognize school directors as outstanding volunteers and champions for public education. Now therefore, I, Jay Inslee, Governor of the State of Washington, do hereby proclaim January 2022 as School Board Recognition Month in Washington, and I encourage all people in our state to join me in this special observation. Just want to recognize all of you and thank you for your service to the students in Lake Washington. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Holman. One of the roles of the board is to provide a forum for the community to provide input to the district. And we do that through a public comment period during our board meetings. We dedicate 30 minutes during these meetings to hear from the public. There are currently 2 options to submit public comment. One is in writing. To do that, please submit your comments by email to Teresa Harding. Her email address is tharding@lwsd.org. And please send those by 3 p.m. on the date of the board meeting. Those comments are compiled and distributed to the board and posted to the district's website. And due to time constraints, not all individuals that submit written public comment will have their statement read aloud at the meeting, but those statements will be memorialized for perpetuity on the district's website. In addition, you can provide televised public comment. To do that, please email Teresa Harding. Again, that's tharding@lwsd.org. If you wish to provide televised public comment, please do so by 1 p.m. on the date of the board meeting, and a Microsoft Teams link will be shared with you to join the meeting. You can then share your comments, which are recorded and televised. Those comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. I will warn you and then cut you off at the 3-minute mark. and you're asked to turn your camera on and your microphone on and speak for the designated 3 minutes. And if after that time is concluded, we ask that you leave the Microsoft Teams meeting and continue watching the live stream broadcast on the internet through the district's website at lwc.org. Before we get to public comment, I've asked, we have a substantial number of people who have signed up to provide public comment on the Emerson High School daycare program. And I've asked Dr. Holman just to provide a very brief update on the status of that before we go into public comment.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I've had dialogue with the board. I've received just a few email communications from staff really asking for a reconsideration around this topic. I worked with my team this morning, looked at a few different components, and emailed those that I had heard from, as well as the administration at the Emerson site, just to let them know that I did change my decision around the Emerson daycare, and with a couple of pieces that we still need to work through. One, we want to make sure that this program was opened with a primary purpose of supporting our teen moms, and we want to make sure that that is continuing to be available. And so we'll work with the Emerson administration to make sure that it is available and all of those pieces for students all across our district and potentially across our region. Because if that's the primary mission of that program, we want to make sure that we're supporting those students to achieve really our mission and vision as a school district, even in those difficult circumstances. Additionally, we also know that community and staff access this daycare as well. And so when we think about the funding changing to that program, we also have to think about how can we fund this program. And so I've asked my team to look at a number of different pieces, also doing some a comparative look at infant and childcare across the region, so that we can benchmark our fees, so that this can be a program that is cost neutral, that it can run, and that it makes sense. This will give us a chance to look and just to understand the implications of running really what is a non-CTE childcare program, really for the long term, and to understand its sustainability. So that's what I have tonight. Another piece that I mentioned in this message that I sent was that the board would have to take action on an adjusted fee schedule in the future. Typically, fee schedules are adjusted in the spring, and so the board can anticipate receiving that in the future.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Holman. Thank you for providing an update to the board this afternoon, too. So we will now go to televised public comment for tonight. I'm taking these in the order that I believe that they were received, the order that are on my list, at least, that was given to me. The first individual we have signed up is Arthur Weiner. And you're on mute. You're on mute, sir.
Can you hear me okay?
Now we can.
Okay, fantastic. I'm actually going to turn off my mic or my camera to share the presentation, so it hopefully flows a little bit better. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak this evening. My wife and I have 3 children in the Lake Washington School District, one at each level of education: high school, middle school, and elementary school. Next slide, please. I'm asking that you separate yourselves as leaders in the community and allow parents to choose whether to send their child to school with their face covered. Face coverings are ineffective. They are harmful and unnecessary. There is mounting evidence that this is the case. Dr. Holman was correct in his remarks acknowledging the board a little bit ago that what you do is challenging. He's also correct that your decisions impact children. So I ask you to reject the mandates. Next slide. The CDC published a study stating, and you can, I cited the study, you can click on the link if you'd like. The lower incidence in schools that require mask use among students was not statistically significant compared with schools where mask use was optional. this is the case, and this is, from my understanding, the largest study to date conducted of this metric, I guess, of whether masks work. Next slide, please. Mounting evidence from doctors all across our nation. The director of emergency medicine, infectious disease management at Boston Medical Center said, "I'm not aware of any studies that show conclusively that kids wearing masks in schools has any effect on their own morbidity or mortality, or on the hospitalization or death rate in the community around them." Next slide. The impact of masks on social and emotional development will continue to grow faster than we are measuring, unfortunately. Masking children is physically and psychologically dangerous. I believe more and more studies will prove that. Next slide, please. Listening to Johnny a little bit earlier during the study session, he reiterated that children's social and emotional state impact the academic results. I believe that covering children's faces is negatively impacting their social and emotional status in school. Next slide, please. There is mounting evidence that the policies in place regarding face masks do not work, and they are negatively impacting our children. So I once again ask you to reject the mandate to cover our children's masks. Next slide, please. There's a little bit of information on VAERS data updated since the last time I presented to you. In the 6 weeks of data from last time I presented, more than 1,000 people died from the COVID vaccines. This is from the VAERS database, the Vaccine Adverse Effects Reporting System. Once again, these vaccines.
Mr. Weiner, if you could just wrap up.
Yes, and that's the next slide. It's not me that's saying. It's not just me that's saying this. People are dying from these vaccines. Look into it. It's worth it. Thank you so much for your time, and I will see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Next, we have signed up for public comment is Ramsey Rammerman.
Good evening. My name is Ramsey Rammerman, and I'm a parent of a child who attends a middle school in the Lake Washington School District. And I'm here tonight to ask the board to stop enforcing the mask mandate so that parents can choose whether or not they want to send their children to school in masks, and to lobby the Department of Health to change its guidance regarding masks at schools. First, the school district's mask mandate is purely for show. The CDC has acknowledged that cloth masks are effectively useless, or as one prominent CNN commentator explained, they're purely decorative and do not provide any meaningful protection. The policy that's currently in force allows cloth masks and therefore is not providing any meaningful protection for our children. Second, the mask requirement is stunting the student's educational development. For all of human history, it has been universally recognized that facial cues form a distinct and important aspect of human communication. Your mission is in part to help develop the strong communication skills for our children, and you're stunting that learning by requiring them to hide their faces and those important communicative cues behind these useless masks. Third, the mask requirement is causing affirmative harm to our students. Growing body of research is showing that kids are starting to become dependent on masks and experience anxiety when they're confronted with large groups of maskless people. The COVID emergency will not last forever, and eventually these kids are going to have to face the maskless. By causing our children to become dependent on masks, you are straddling these children with unnecessary anxieties that they will then have to work to overcome when they interact with the world. School is supposed to help prepare our children to face the world, not make them afraid to face the world. If parents are concerned about their children, let them send their children to school in their top quality N95 masks that are properly fitted, and that will protect those children. But the time has come to allow the rest of us parents to make our own decisions for our own children and stop mandating a one-size-fits-all policy that is useless, debilitating, and harmful, that only serves to make some people who don't keep up with the science feel better, but does not provide any meaningful benefit for our children. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Next, we have signed up for public comment is Tara Belfield.
Yes, good evening and happy School Board Appreciation Month. My name is Tara Belfield. I am one of the school psychologists at Redmond High School, and my son Will also attends the Emerson Daycare Program. I know there are quite a few of us this evening from Emerson, and so I just wanted to modify my comments and start off by saying a huge and heartfelt thank you. I know earlier this afternoon, several of us received a communication from Dr. Holman indicating the change in decision to close the Emerson Daycare. So we want to thank you, Dr. Holman, and school board members for seeing the value of what the daycare program does for a school like Emerson. Emerson is, for all intents and purposes, a choice school. Traditionally, it can also be coined the alternative high school within the district. Through student testimony, we know that for many Emerson students, the daycare, simply by existing in the high school setting, allows students to accomplish significant academic and personal goals. For many students, their interactions with the daycare students alone are enough for them to keep coming back to school again and again. I don't know of a more powerful, organic, and simple intervention aimed at increasing school engagement than the joy of a toddler who runs toward you because they know that you are the one teen who will read Go Dog Go 12 times in a row. Thank you also, Dr. Holman, school board members, for seeing the value of what a daycare program for teen parents can do to remove systemic barriers, allowing for success for both learners and them as parents. The data on teen parents and the supports required to keep these students engaged in their academics and complete their high school education is long established. And since 1976, the district has maintained a highly successful program that has supported over 250 teen parents. We are so grateful today about the decision to continue the daycare in order to, again, continue the work and move forward in supporting these students. So again, during this School Board Appreciation Month, we just wanted to extend our sincere appreciation for allowing us a couple opportunities now to share what we value about the Emerson Daycare Program and for allowing that good work to continue. So thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight. Next I have signed up is Stephanie Moynihan.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak tonight. And I just want to echo what Tara said, that we are so grateful that you are giving the Emerson Daycare a chance to find a way forward. We're so grateful. It gives so much wonderful nurturing experience to kids who are not conventional caretakers, learn how to become caregivers to kids. They gain a sense of competence and a value to society. I teared up when we got the message that we were going to have a plan to move forward today. I'm just so grateful. So that's really all I wanted to say after hearing the news. So thank you so much for considering the value of our program. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming tonight. Next I have is William Gardner. You're on mute, Mr. Gardner.
I apologize.
No problem.
I will not subject you to my emotion this time around, but I want to tell you how much I appreciate the decision. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for taking the time to consider it. It's a huge deal. Dr. Holman, thank you very much. I had a whole speech ready to give. It won't be necessary. But I would like to share a quote from a student that was a personal, for all of us at Emerson, was a very personal project. He came to us really young with a chip on his shoulder, like many young men who come through and young women. But he graduated in 2013 and he reached out with this, which it was really good to connect with them. And his experience was like, that program changed my life. It showed me how to appreciate young life. It gave me an opportunity to get a job people really respected on my resume, and it helped me become a fit father. And I can tell you that that young man did not come from ideal circumstances, and it broke a cycle with him. He welcomed his first kid in the last year, and we're super proud of him, and he's doing great. So I just thank you so much for continuing this program for both our young mothers and, you know, the future fathers as well. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming again tonight. Next I have is Julia Rosenlund. I think I saw Julia on here.
Oh,
Hello.
Yep. Yeah, hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, and you got my name right, so that's good. So I just want to kind of just reiterate what everybody else said, but also obviously I'm kind of a more recent graduate of Emerson. I graduated 11 years ago now, and I personally went to school with many mothers, young mothers who got pregnant while at Emerson or before they went to Emerson at other LW schools. And I reached out to a few of them just to see, like, hey, just to let them know this is what's going on. And I got quite a few responses. They may have not reached out, but that they would not have graduated without Emerson daycare. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like that daycare provided something that a lot of, especially teens who go to that school, a lot of them don't have the greatest home life and don't have a lot of resources and don't have a lot of, you know, support at home. Emerson daycare provided that for them. I enjoyed it more than probably any class I went to. It was probably most of the reason I showed up to school half the time, which is sad, but you know, I graduated. And I graduated with honors, and I just really want to thank Dr. Holman that you guys, you know, reconsider this, because it's a big thing. It's a really, really big deal to future lives. I mean, these people are now 30 years old and they have families of their own and lives and jobs, and that might not have been something that they accomplished without Emerson or the daycare program. So thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming tonight. Next I have signed up is Tammy DeRoche.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, board, and thank you for allowing me to speak tonight, and thank you for all you do for us and our students. As a district employee, I'm a physical therapist in the Special Services Division, and as a parent, most especially as a parent of a student at Emerson High School. I'm here tonight to add my support and to also say thank you to Dr. Holman for the news of today. Changing that decision and exploring ways to keep the daycare open is so important to me. I'm so happy to hear it. I would still like to read my comment just to, I guess, officially voice my support. My daughter is currently a senior at Emerson, and she struggled in the traditional public school setting for school. We were fortunate to locate a private school for her, which offered instruction for students with different learning needs and learning styles. She thrived there and made great gains, catching up in the areas where she had fallen behind in traditional setting. And she told us it was the first time that she felt cared about in the school setting. So after she aged out of there, we had to find a location for her to attend high school. And thankfully, we stumbled upon Emerson. Even though I already worked for the district, I didn't know that we had this gem. But anyway, Emerson provided small class sizes for her. They had instruction led by a team of experienced teachers who were willing to work outside the box to meet our students where they are. And it provided the opportunities for the non-traditional and experiential learning of participating in Child Lab through the daycare. So before COVID hit, my daughter was only able to visit the daycare a couple of times, but she had a wonderful experience, and she was hoping that she would be able to work in the daycare setting and take that child lab class. She's still hoping that before graduation they can sneak at least a little of that in. But she was hoping that she would gain confidence working with kids, that she would learn about child development, and gain direct experience that would provide her some good use in an employment setting after graduation. She's also considering studying education and thought that this might help her decide if this was a career route for her. So in summary, this daycare is a really special place. It needs to remain open to support our district's teen parents, to support the childcare needs of our staff and also our community, and to provide those unique learning experiences that aren't offered at any of our other high schools, so that non-traditional learners will have an opportunity to continue to thrive as well. So there you have it. Thank you so much, and take care. Have a good night.
Thank you for coming. That is the end of our televised public comment tonight. We're over time for public comment, but I do want to note that we did receive written public comment from Melody Kiefer, the office manager at Laura Ingalls Wilder Elementary, who expressed gratitude to the staff at the central leadership, the central office, for going above and beyond to ensure that our schools were open and staffing our schools personally when we had a substitute shortage and teacher shortage. And very kind of her to write to that. And then we received public comment from Joseland Gracian on the Emerson High School daycare program, advocating that the district maintain that program. And then finally, we received written public comment from Pat and Lindell Jacobs, advocating that the district ban critical race theory in public schools. Those are the written public comments that we received tonight. Those public comments are, well, we don't have time to read them all aloud tonight. They have been distributed to the board. They're in our board packet. And they are also being posted to the district's website for this meeting and will be available for viewing. The next item on the agenda is approval of the January 24, 2022 consent agenda. I will now entertain a motion to approve that consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved by Director Carlson, seconded by Director Stewart, that we approve the consent agenda as presented. Dr. Holman, will you please poll the board?
Absolutely. Director Bleasner?
Yes.
Director Carlson?
Yes.
Director Choi?
Yes.
Vice President Stewart?
Yes.
And President LaLiberty?
Yes. The motion carries. Dr. Holman, will you please summarize the donations that we received in advance of the meeting tonight?
Absolutely. And I just want to remind the board that we increased our threshold in our policy around the donations that come to the board for approval to $5,000. And so we go through our process of recognition and appreciation to those that donate below that threshold. But just that was a change that was made a number of months ago. And so just want to also remind us all of that. But tonight we have donations totaling over $31,000, PTSA donations just over $21,000, and a private donation totaling $10,000. Again, I know I say this every time, but these partnerships and these funds allow us to continue to support our students in unique ways in our schools. And so it's through these types of partnerships, in this case financial, with our community, that we're able to provide additional supports, programs, and services for our students. So thank you for these donations.
Thank you, Dr. Holman. The next item on the agenda is a board statement, and I'm wondering if Dr. Holman, if you're able to, or if someone is able to share their screen and have that displayed. And I'll just I'll preface the statement first before we get to it. The board has a written statement that I will read aloud tonight. It's not something that we know. It's not a resolution or a proclamation. Does not need adoption, but it's a statement of the full board. I worked with the full board on it, and also received input from staff members and members of the community. So let's see here. I can share. I actually am able to. Looks like I am able to share my screen if we need to do that. But Dr. Holland, if you're able to, I'd rather have you drive.
Can you see it? Because I'm sharing it right now.
Hold on. Yes, now I can. Okay. I will read aloud the statement. This will also be posted on this meeting tab, and I think we'll also have it posted on the board tab of the website. The Lake Washington School District Board of Directors is committed to ensuring an inclusive, equitable, welcoming, and safe school environment in which all students are seen, heard, and valued. This commitment, embedded in the board's written policies means that we expect all students will be provided, 1, an anti-racist, inclusive, equitable, welcoming, and safe school and classroom environment, 2, rigorous expectations and supports to allow growth, success, and well-being, and 3, curriculum and instruction that is culturally responsive and inclusive. We know that meeting these expectations require our teachers and students to engage in conversations and learning about the legacy of oppression and the ways in which race, identity, and culture are intertwined in our society. We know that these conversations can be challenging and at times uncomfortable, but we firmly believe that students have the right to hear and evaluate differing points of views, and we believe that effective citizenship requires that students study issues that are controversial. We also believe that staff have the right to work in an environment that is safe and free from discrimination. And we stand by our teachers and staff who are doing this important work. Thank you for your unwavering commitment to our students. And so this is a statement from the full board on this meeting from January 24, 2022, and it will also be posted on our website. Thank you, Dr. Holman, for posting that. And thank you to everyone on the board for working on this statement. The next item on the agenda is a program update on inclusionary practices. Dr. Holman, can you please kick us off?
Absolutely. And you know what, this is some of the work that is continuing here in the district that is near and dear to my heart. And I'm so excited about the update that Associate Superintendent Mike Van Orden and Executive Director of Special Services, Dr. Shannon Hitch, will be providing tonight, because it really, even in the midst of these challenging times, our schools are continuing to lean into practices that you're not going to find in every school district. And so, as the board knows, a number of years ago, we worked to identify a model of inclusion in our preschool classrooms. So right now, our preschool programs are fully inclusionary. Students from all developmental backgrounds learning together in our preschool programs. And really, our work around inclusionary practices at the elementary level, we have a number of partnerships. We've done deep professional learning around this. We had a number of pilot schools, and really, Mike and Shannon are here tonight really to share with you the next phase of inclusionary practices at the elementary level in Lake Washington, and then really the pathway to have all of our elementary schools as inclusionary in their service delivery. So, Mike, I'll let you go ahead and kick us off.
Yeah, thank you. You may recall, too, in November, we provided you with an update on our work to make our schools more inclusive for not only students with disabilities, but for all of our students. And at that time, we shared kind of our latest thinking, as well as having our principals from 3 of our pilot schools share their experiences. And so based on the work that we've been doing at those pilot schools, as well as work with all of our school administrators at the elementary level, staff, specialists, Dr. Hitch's team, we're here tonight to share with you our latest thinking on the next phase of our efforts to make our schools more inclusive. And as I mentioned, not only for students with disabilities, but for all students, because we know the value of inclusion really does serve every one of our kids. So I'll do the majority of the presentation tonight. Dr. Hitch will chime in as well to provide some clarification, and then we will leave just a little bit of time there at the end for some questions. And let me get this presentation up for us as well. All right. Can everybody see that okay? Okay. So as far as our overview tonight, we're going to just again remind folks of our rationale and the goals for our work. And this is work that's been happening over a number of years. And so as we have learned more, our goals have been becoming clearer and sharper. As Dr. Holman also mentioned, we have a number of partners, not only from Washington State and also from the TIE Center out of the University of Minnesota. And we want to just provide a little bit of an update on how our partners are supporting our efforts. Then we'll give you an update on progress we've made to date, including work since our last update in November. Then I think the most interesting part, and probably what most folks want to hear most about, is our plans for 22-23, so for next school year, and then also our thinking as of tonight for 23 and beyond, and then we'll wrap up with next steps. So it's important just to remind ourselves of the value of inclusion for our students. And right now I'm talking specifically about students with disabilities, but we know, as you read even in your introductory statement, the value of making our schools inclusive, that they're welcoming places for every student in the school where they can experience success both academically and socially, emotionally. But in terms of tonight, we're talking very specifically as well about students with significant cognitive disabilities that are currently served in programs that may not be in their neighborhood school. And we know when students are educated together with their peers, there are academic benefits, but there's also school climate and culture that improves. It's the relationships and friendships that can form when kids are educated with their peers, and not just necessarily even in the same school, but in the same classroom and side by side with their peers. We also recognize that long term, as we move out into the world, we are interacting with all sorts of people with different backgrounds and experiences and gifts and talents. And the more that kids can have that experience in a school setting, the better prepared they are to go out in the world and to be contributing adults in their world. In addition, having kids in their neighborhood allows families to integrate with each other and build relationships with each other. And it also allows us to create more meaningful interaction with our teachers. And in this case, teachers that are currently general ed or special education teachers. So lots of research-based benefits of inclusion. In addition, when we talk about inclusive education, I think it's good just to have a picture of what we're talking about. And so these are some points from Dr. Julie Costin, who is a person that we've drawn from in terms of informing our inclusionary practices efforts. And obviously, we have to think about the classroom level and what's happening at the classroom and how are we creating the classroom. But also, it's really thinking about a student-centered approach to instruction in the school day, and that we're thinking about the needs of every single one of our students and how do we tailor our classrooms in our schools to allow students to really experience all the benefits of being in that school. In addition, there's lots of different things we have to think about to make our schools inclusive. So, it's easy to say, hey, let's be inclusive, but really get specific about what that looks like. And that includes things like the schedule, so that there's time for kids to get their needs met within the school day, the curriculum, so that it's accessible regardless of how a student's entering into the classroom, training for the folks and teaming in our schools so that they can work effectively together to serve their students. And then the classroom climate. Do students feel welcome when they walk in? And we heard this and we did it when we did our linkages. We said one of the most important things to make students feel included is that connection that they have with their teacher and the adults in the school and with each other. So again, as we're building an inclusive school, we're thinking about all of these things together. In addition, you may recall our strategic plan includes efforts to build a multi-year plan for inclusion of students with disabilities with their general education peers. And so we have been working on that for a number of years, but I have to say the plan really is starting to become much more concrete and specific, and that's really mostly due to the work of Dr. Hitch and her team to start to bring specificity and a real concrete actionable plan, some of which we'll share with you tonight. And so really taking that strategic plan and putting it into a form that can be put into practice and implemented. In addition, I wanted to just share a little bit of information. Back in 2019, when we were starting some of this work, we were looking at how students spent their days in our schools. And in particular, students with intellectual disabilities, about 2.5% of those students spent 80 to 100% of their time in a general education classroom with their peers. And about 66% of their time was really in kind of a more of a self-contained setting. Or 66% of our students were spending the majority of their time in a more of a self-contained setting. And as you all know, we have self-contained programs in our schools. In addition, with those self-contained programs, those aren't in every elementary school. And so in some cases, a student might be in a boundary area for a school in their neighborhood, but then end up going to another school to attend and participate in the program at that school. And while there are some benefits to that, all of the things I mentioned at the beginning in terms of having an inclusive school community is in your neighborhood school with your gen ed peers in a general education setting. And so our work really is to start to shift to have more students spending more time in general education settings with their peers, and recognizing that there will be times where we're thinking about how services are provided and where they're provided, but really that's kind of our goal and our target. So as I mentioned at the beginning, and again, really in large part to the work Dr. Hitch and her team has been doing, starting to really identify what are those concrete goals that we're going to work towards as a district. And part of this work has come through also our partners that we've been working with from the University of Washington, as well as the Ty Center from the University of Minnesota. And so these are the goals that we're working towards over 5 years. And as you all know, 5-year goals need to be revisited regularly, but as of today, these are what we're working with. So our goal is to have all students, and we're talking right now specifically about elementary students attending their neighborhood schools with access to a full continuum of services. And so again, that idea of a center-based or program-based model in a different school, we're working to have students return to their neighborhood schools. In addition, we're working to have students not only in their neighborhood school, and so the idea here is not to have a separate class in their neighborhood school, but to actually be partnering and in class with their peers, accessing core instruction in general education. At the secondary level, we do have students in their neighborhood schools, and our goal is to start increasing co-teaching, which we've shared over the years with you, with the idea of a special education and a general education teacher partnering in the class so that that class is really accessible to all students and that they're helping each other make that class more accessible to students with disabilities. And then finally, we are really, this is a longer term goal, but knowing that we have, and you heard about some of these folks tonight, we have folks in our schools that provide interventions in literacy and help around how to provide and make curriculum accessible to students who are multilingual learners. And all of those people bring a skill set, and ideally you're working towards having all the people in a school really working together to provide the supports for kids as they need them and how they need them. So if a student is learning a second language and they have a disability, then there might be a special education teacher or a multilingual teacher, and that is serving that student. And really that's a fluid process. It's based on student need. So again, that's part of the effort that's happening as well at the school to make them more inclusive. More specifically, though, as we move into 22-23, we are looking at increasing the number of schools where students are attending their neighborhood school. And there are a number of reasons why we're kind of doing this phased approach, which I'll talk about in a moment. But the idea for next year is we have a number of schools in what we used to call the Lake Washington Learning Community. And so the idea is to have each of those schools serving their neighborhood students. And we'll talk a little bit more because there's some nuance in there. If you recall as well, Kirkland Middle School has been part of our pilot project, and so many of these schools feed into Kirkland Middle, and so there was just a natural connection there with those schools. So Dr. Hitch and I have actually gone out and met with the leadership at each of those schools, talked through what that's like, worked with our partners, which we'll share in a few moments, just to kind of start to flesh out the details of that. And really, this is kind of the next stage in an effort to get to that longer term goal of having every student served in their neighborhood school. In addition, we're going to continue to support our pilot schools, in this case Rockwell, that's not in that former learning community, as well as continuing to support Kirkland Middle. And then again, our goal for next year in addition is not just to say we're going to take a program from one school and put a program in another school, but really to be working in those neighborhood schools to increase access to general education settings. And so we're going to continue to monitor that so students with disabilities are spending more and more time in general education settings with the support that they need to do that. Finally, just as some context, we wanted to share, again, this really is part of our larger equity work because we know that there are a number of factors that unfortunately currently are predictors of how students will achieve in our schools. And one of those is disability. And so our goal is to remove that as a predictor, that students should have access and have success regardless of what they the skills or talents or unique gifts that they bring to a school. And so really our goal with this project is connected to our larger equity efforts that also include race and gender identity and how students come to school each day. This is one element of a larger equity picture. So I did mention partnerships, and again, part of our work started really as kind of a small effort with a smaller team, but as we've started to work towards planning for a larger scale of implementation, we've recognized the need and the value of having external partners with our work. And so we've shared some of these before, but just as an example, we have been part of, for the past 2 years now, a statewide inclusionary practices project. And that has connected us with partners at the University of Washington, as well as the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction and the University of Minnesota TIE Center, which is really kind of a cutting edge group around increasing instructional time for students with significant disabilities. And so those partners have been side by side with us through our planning efforts, our pilot efforts, and really have made a difference in kind of starting to help us get some traction as we move into our next stage of this project. So as I mentioned, this has been part of a larger process statewide that included increased funding across the state. And so we've received some of that funding to help with our planning efforts. It also helps to pay for some of the partnerships that we have. In addition, there's professional development that we're continuing to take advantage of, including work for our administrators who are part of the next phase through the Washington Association of School Principals. And that's going to actually help to launch us into the next stage of our work. And really the goal here is to increase the skills and capacity, because it's one thing to say we should work towards inclusive schools, but there are a lot of things that need to be in place to make sure that you have success when you do that, including the skill sets of the folks who are working in those schools. And so to build those skill sets out really is so important to our success. So just briefly, again, the statewide level of support really has been pushed out to districts in a lot of different levels. So there are demonstration site schools that serve as models for other schools. There's professional development opportunities. There's also a district level demonstration site, and we are honored to be part of that, where Lake Washington is a statewide demonstration district, along with Twain, which is one of our statewide demonstration sites, to show and explain and provide examples of the pathway to make our schools and our districts much more inclusive. And so we're continuing to take advantage of these opportunities in our own work, but are also serving as models and support for other schools and districts in the state. So just a recap of some of the progress that we've made to date. And again, Dr. Holman mentioned this, and I think I shared it as well. We really are taking a stage-based approach to this work. And that idea is really grounded in research around effective implementation of new initiatives. And it's a lot of it was started out in the healthcare field, but has been applied to education and other areas. And the idea is whenever you have some new way of going about your work as an organization, and it may not be new in the larger sense, but it's maybe new to your organization, there are a number of stages that if you go through these stages, that you actually end up getting more success and more successful implementation. And in some ways this is linear, but it's also recursive, that you might start in a stage where you're doing some exploration, which we did, and we'll talk about more in a second. And then you start making sure that there's infrastructure in place to support the work that you've learned about. And then you start implementation. But if you go all in, one of the things that is shared is sometimes going all in, if you make mistakes on a large scale, that's a much different story than if you're learning and kind of figuring things out on a smaller scale and learning from those and then improving, and then you scale up to a larger scale. And so again, these ideas of the stage-based approach to implementation really are grounded in research on organizations that have made effective use of implementation efforts. And so as we've been developing our work, we've been following this model. And so just as an example of that, back as early as 2018-19, we had a number of school principals that came to us and said, hey, this is an area that we are very interested in. And as you may recall, we started a smaller inclusionary practices group really to learn more about how do you start to scale up inclusion in your district. And as you may recall, we worked with Dr. Cassie Martin from the University of Washington at the time, as well as a group of principals, classified staff members, teachers, and a couple of our parents to kind of help us just learn more about inclusion. You may recall we also visited other schools and districts, read research, just to get grounded in that work. And so that is kind of that exploration phase. In addition, we were doing some work to plan for, as Dr. Holman mentioned, the move to make our preschools fully inclusive. In 2019-20, we started moving to actually implementing at our preschool level, which starts to create some momentum for our district, which was very exciting, and just can't say enough about the amazing work that's happening in our preschools and the staff and the families and the students that are making that so successful. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, we had a couple of our sites that were demonstration or served as pilots. One of those is a statewide demonstration site, as well as Lake Washington being a district demonstration site. And then last year, we really started moving to that idea of creating pilot sites. And so some of the administrators that were on that initial group way back in 2018 stepped up and offered to be kind of those first folks to go out and try some things out in our schools. And then that allowed us to start working closely with our partners to start figuring out how do we now go from a few pilot sites to a next stage where we're adding more schools. In addition, those partners brought us connections with the CAST Center, which we've shared information about this idea of universal design for learning. The CAST Center is really the organization that has created that structure. And so we were very fortunate to be able to work with them to create professional learning for the folks in our district. And so those modules are now available not only to Lake Washington, but they're now available to schools and districts across the nation. And then this year, we really have been working to that next stage. And so we've been working with our principals. We've been implementing those universal design for learning modules. We've had coaching in our pilot sites from the University of Washington and Ty Center. And as I mentioned at the beginning, Dr. Hitch really has taken the lead on this to create multiple implementation teams to start figuring out how do we scale up in a very systematic way to start having all of our students returning to their schools. So as I mentioned earlier, we have a number of different teams, and this work wouldn't be possible without all folks really working together. So we have our instructional leaders, not only from our district, but our schools. We have a core planning team that includes central leadership, administrators, as well as our partners. We have a district large inclusion team that's much more broad, that includes not only the folks I mentioned, but additional teachers, administrators, as well as specialists from our special services. And Dr. Hitch has been leading the efforts to partner with the Lake Washington Education Association to think about things like staffing and our models. And then in addition, we have smaller teams that we've been working with, planning teams and principal teams, to help us really kind of piece together and start putting together plans for our work. In addition, as part of that stage-based approach, there's installation. You have to make sure there's infrastructure to support your plans as you start to implement. And so those are including things like staffing, our learning spaces where our kids will have opportunities not only to be in their classroom with their peers, but to make sure that there's resources and facilities that support them. And that includes everything from some of our students, as you know, have medical needs, and some of those come with equipment and supplies and learning spaces. Professional learning, which I've already mentioned, and then as well, that schedule at the elementary level is so important to make sure there's time in the day for kids to get more individualized support and instruction. So those things, when they're in place, are the foundation on which you start to build inclusive practices. So here we are today, and I think it's important also to be very realistic about where we are. And Dr. Holman mentioned we have been in a pandemic. And we are still in a pandemic, and our schools are working harder than ever. And I've been in education almost 25 years now, and I can't ever remember a time that's been this challenging. And there have been lots of challenges in our education system. And that being said, I think it's important to recognize that we're continuing to make momentum, but it's also important to do that in a way that acknowledges the challenges we're experiencing. So I think one of the first things that Dr. Hitch has been sharing and gathering information from folks is that our administrators and our teachers and our families know that inclusion work is the right work to do. I think where there's concern and hesitation is just making sure we're putting the plans in place in a specific enough way that people know the supports will be there. That being said, also, we know that there are some of our administrators that are more steeped in inclusive practices and others that are kind of on the earlier stages of learning. And you have to recognize that there's a continuum of skills and knowledge about inclusion that we have to start to build, particularly for those folks that are newer to this work, so that they're equipped and prepared. And again, with 53 schools and 30 plus elementaries, there are people in a lot of different places. We also know, and for a number of years, you may remember a few years back, we had some family advocates who came and spoke at board meetings to really champion the value of inclusion, and that knowledge has been really growing in our district. That's coming in part from our parent partners, as well as Dr. Hitch and her team working to engage and reach out to the community and really share the importance of the work, as well as our community partners really pushing on us to continue to improve and grow. In addition, we now have the partnership with our TIES Center and our pilot schools to build on. And again, as I was mentioning earlier, recognizing the impact of COVID has caused us to be thoughtful about how quickly we proceed. And so again, the idea of starting with the next phase of more schools that maybe are a little bit further along and a little more ready allows us to continue to build momentum, recognizing where we are as a district, and knowing we're still working to have all schools have their students served in their neighborhood, but knowing that that's going to need to be something that maybe is done a little bit, maybe a little slower than we thought back in August when the world was so different than it was even today. So 22-23, what we are going to be doing, as I mentioned, is the schools, the elementary schools in the former Lake Washington learning community, which include Twain, Lakeview, Kirk, Rush, Audubon, Franklin, and Rose Hill. We'll have students transition to their neighborhood school. Now, again, it's important to note here that families will have the choice, because we also know that families have built connections and relationships in the school they're currently in. And so they may say, you know, particularly the students who are a little bit older, they have those relationships established. They may have a year or two left. And to move them and transition them again would be a greater hardship than we'd get value of it. And so really this will be a conversation with each family about the benefits of being in neighborhood school, the benefits of staying in the school they're currently in, and making that decision on a student by student basis. That being said, each of these schools serves roughly 4 to 5 students that have significant disabilities in their neighborhood. Some are a little bit higher than that. But the idea there is that if you serve the students in your neighborhood, you're not serving like we have, for example, at Twain with 20 plus students, which is a very different proposition than if you have maybe 4 students with significant disabilities that have unique needs that we have to meet. And so the idea there is really to have students served in their neighborhood school and then really bring the resources to them. As I mentioned, we'll continue to support our practices at Rockwell and Kirkland, and we're going to continue to work to build time in general education settings. Finally, just a couple other things to share that, again, once we start to implement, we have to make sure that we're, again, attending to implementation science. And we know that you have to be thinking about effective practices. You have to be thinking about how you implement those practices, and you have to think about who and how and where you're implementing them if you really want to see improved outcomes. Because if you miss any one of these things, the implementation doesn't go well. If you put terrible practices in place, even with a great plan, that's not a good way to go. If you have great practices, but you don't have a good implementation plan, they're not used, and so you don't get the outcomes you want. And so we really are thinking about these as part of our plan for next year. So as far as effective practices go, as I mentioned, one of those that we know from research is having students in their neighborhood schools with their peers. That comes, though, with the need to be thinking about how you make their instruction and their curriculum accessible to every single one of them. And one of the ways we do that is through this idea of universal design for learning. We also have to model those with coaching and support, have teacher teams working together, and make sure that our schedules really do accommodate the needs of each kid. So those are effective practices. And then when we look at what needs to be in place to implement those well, as I mentioned, there'll be meetings with each family to make sure that families are part of the plan to think about how their students are served. There'll be professional learning to make sure that our administrators and teachers know about universal design, coaches that can make sure that we sustain it. We also are going to be thinking about the staffing so that there's a full-time special education teacher in addition to the special education staff that's currently in a school. And then finally, helping schools think about those schedules and how do you develop them so that students can be served. And then the who and how. And so there we're thinking about implementation teams that really are overseeing and making sure that we're providing the support for these schools. And then finally, thinking about that blended staffing that I mentioned earlier. So the people that are in place to implement the effective practices, when you bring those together, you really do get better outcomes. And that's not to say everything will go perfectly every single day, but really if you disregard these things, your chances of having effective implementation are significantly reduced. In addition, I mentioned some of the other things that we have to be considering. So, for example, curriculum, equipment, and making sure that it's not saying to students, you're back in your neighborhood school, but you're in your own classroom, self-contained all day. It's really you're in with your peers in classroom settings, on the playground, in the lunchroom, and really working to build that out so that that time is increasing. And then wrapping up, just thinking longer term, and again, these are a little bit more, these aren't quite as concrete as our plans for next year, but as we think about 22-23, as I mentioned, we're working to bring students back in the Lake Washington, former Lake Washington learning community, as well as increasing co-teaching. But then in 23-24, our goal right now really is to think about having every student in every one of our elementary schools have the option to be educated in their home school, in their neighborhood school, and then to increase co-teaching across our secondary. And then over the following years really is to start building the supports and structures so that the amount of time students are learning with their general education peers really is increasing, and that our teachers and our administrators and our families are all really working together to make sure that we're getting success. As we move into kind of our next stage, we have, as I mentioned, met with each of the schools that we're working with next year. And we want to make sure that we're also working with the staff at those schools. So Dr. Hitch and I are meeting with the principals at each of those schools to talk about how to work with their staff to help them understand kind of our next steps. We have to work with our families. That's families in a broad sense, but also the families of students who potentially will be moving. We are already, in fact, tomorrow, Dr. Hitch has set up professional development for our administrators. They're beginning that right as we speak. But we're also looking at professional learning that will happen through the summer for our teachers, because we know right now time is just so valuable. And then really that planning around staffing, facilities, instructional supports, and schedules is going to be happening through now and through the summer, and actually even through the coming years, so that we're kind of geared up to be ready to launch in the fall. And so again, as I mentioned, the summer professional development will be a really important part of that. So a lot of work, and again, I can't emphasize enough the leadership that Dr. Hitch has taken on this, the work that's happened from our building administrators, our staff, our teachers, our special services specialists, and folks that work in special services, as well as our central leadership. Pretty much all of our directors have kind of stepped in and taken a part of this, and that includes everything from teaching and learning, intervention services, student services, our equity team have all been at the table and really helped to make this work. So I just wanted to acknowledge and appreciate them. And so we're excited, and I think maybe a little nervous too, but it's the right work, and I think it's going to make a major difference in the lives of our students and their families. And that is officially it for our presentation.
I think there's some questions. Director Stewart, you want to go first?
You're muted.
Muted.
Okay. Once we stop doing these computer things, we're going to have to figure out how to mute me when I'm not on a computer. Okay. Mike, I want to tell you how much I appreciate you and your staff and all the folks that went into this process. It's who would have thought that you'd have throw in a pandemic would be one of your hurdles too. I mean, minor little detail. I am concerned about when the students can return to their neighborhood schools, how will they be able to access their services for OT, PT, SLP, such required in their IEP. And I know that's a kind of a finite, kind of a picky detail, but for those kids, it's essential. It's like air. And I'm not doubting our intent, but what I'm wondering is where we're going to get the quantity of those therapists in order to cover those, because I know that currently our OTs, PTs, and so forth are driving like mad men and women from one school to the other, but they're able to cluster 4 or 5 at one school and 4 or 5 at another. So, do we have a pipeline to some great training ground?
Yeah, and as I mentioned, Dr. Hitch has been doing so much work to kind of set the stage for that, and so I'm going to let her speak more to. Okay. I think not only that, but also the teachers who are currently serving as learning center or learning center teachers is part of that mix too. So Dr. Hitch, do you want to just speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think the it actually could potentially benefit the relationships that therapists have with kids in schools in shifting to this model, because right now a lot of our schools are shared by multiple therapists just due to the volume of students who are serving that school and that program. And so when you are able to spread students out and you're able to have them participating with their neighborhood peers, you already have OT and speech services for kids at that school. They serve all kids, not just those with significant cognitive disabilities. And so you're just going to increase the time of the therapist at that building. And actually that could then allow for that therapist to develop more relationship and connection with that school rather than being drive-by with their therapy services. So the other piece is that, with an inclusive model, we're seeking to have kids, getting supports that they need within general education. And that means helping teachers implement strategies under the recommendation of therapists as well, so that they're able to have kids working on and generalizing skills in the classroom. That being said, it's always a puzzle to put together all the different therapist FTEs and pieces, and part of that is something that we'll be learning as we seek to implement this model to see if we need to make any adjustments if we go district-wide.
Thank you very much. The other question I have, perhaps going back to Mike, I appreciate the fact in the reasoning behind the staged implementation. There's nothing worse than launching a program and not having all the pieces in place, because that's a recipe for disaster. But for those secondary students who won't be in those schools that are targeted for their first wave, if you will, would we be able to at least implement putting the students in their the homerooms of the high schools they're in and the middle schools they're in? That seems to be a major first step in being able to blend the cultures. I know my son was in his homeroom for all 3 years of high school, and it was an amazing part of the learning experience for him and the kids around him, and relationships that he built. And it's kind of one of those where there's not a tension of having to implement the lesson plan at the same time of trying to blend the kids all together. Anyway, will you speak to that?
Yeah, and I think, and Dr. Hitch can as well. One of the things we've been learning as a result of our phased approach and our pilot approach is that, every step helps you make progress towards the larger goal, which I think is exactly what you're describing. Like we said, let's have students in their neighborhood school first. And then the next step is some more time with their peers. And then the next step is really to start thinking about, and these don't always have to flow in exactly this order and the time changes, but the next step is thinking about instruction and the quality of the instruction so they have access. But every single one of those steps is helping you make that progress. And so you're right on the money there. And I also wanted to say, and I forgot to mention this, but I was thanking everybody. Director Stewart and former Director Cassandra Sage have been part of our work and our planning efforts too. And that's what we're learning as we're hearing is, if you try to do everything at once, it's overwhelming. But if you start to make steps, you start to get success, and then people see that success and want to do more. And so I think there's a lot to be said and a lot of merit in that description. Okay. Shannon, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Other than I just think it's a wonderful idea. The more opportunities that we have to integrate children, the better. And all of our secondary students, for the most part, are in their neighborhood schools, but that doesn't mean they're included. And so that is where I think opportunities like you describe, or when we see amazing things happening, like with Unified Sports up at Eastlake High School, those are the kind of things where inclusion's happening, because there's friendships and there's relationships and there's equal opportunities and engagement. And so I think that's a great idea to throw out to our secondary schools to consider.
One of the big reasons I make such a big deal of this one, and I know this is not a new song you've heard from me, but in my son's senior year, there were only 3 kids included in the big graduate picture when they put them all in the stadium or whatever and get them all together. And those 3 kids were the ones who had participation in their homerooms. The other kids never got a notice because there was a disconnect between notifying them in the non-homeroom setting and being able to just hit every home run. And it was a shame. I was glad my son was able to participate in it, but at the same time, I really felt bad for the kids that got missed. And I'd really love to see that bypassed this year.
Thanks. Chris?
So operationally, I've got a question for you. One of the keys to this, to making it work in this next phase, is increased co-teaching in general ed classroom. And it's just an operational question for you, but where do the co-teachers come from? So this is going to require manpower in the gen ed classroom. Does that mean that in the non-mainstream classroom we'll be reducing the amount of staffing to that, or is this throwing extra teachers at the SPED students across the board to make inclusion more feasible? I'm just trying to figure out where the budget works.
Yeah, so
and
there's
I
a
apologize
range.
for being said.
There's a range. There's formal co-teaching. I think we've shared over the years a number of models for that. More of that is probably happening at the secondary level, and so that's a special education, a general education teacher in the classroom at the same time. And rather than having students pulled out, they're getting their instruction, and both teachers are. And I think some of you have we've done some walkthroughs, and you've seen some of that. Some of that's happening at elementary too, and that's a model that can be part of the work. In addition, a special education teacher can consult with the teacher and be in a classroom, observe, give feedback, help planning the lesson, or even provide services to small groups of students. And some of those students might have an IEP, some might be multilingual, some might need help with literacy instruction. And so really that teacher becomes part of the overall makeup of the school. So all that being said, very specifically to your question, there is additional staffing that's coming. So teachers who are currently maybe serving as a program would be assigned to a school in addition to somebody who's currently serving as a resource teacher. But as Dr. Hitch, I think, has mentioned in the past, our goal is really to say, you're not an LC teacher or a resource teacher or multilingual. You're a teacher in the school providing support, and you're bringing your skill set to that. And so you really want the school to kind of build their staffing model around their intervention blocks and the supports. So Shannon, I don't know if you want to mention any more about kind of the thinking of how the schools will be staffed, kind of getting to Chris's question about, do you need more people to do the work?
Yeah, at the secondary level, I do think you need a bit more staffing in the sense that the principals are trying to put together such an amazingly complex picture with all of the different classes. And it's really, it's not about additional special ed staffing, it's just it's shifting the work they're doing. So instead of them teaching a self-contained class to just special education students, those kids are integrated into gen ed classes, and the special ed teacher goes in and provides support or co-teaches with a teacher. And co-teaching is an
That's
organic
exactly what
process.
I was wondering.
Yeah, it's an organic process. You have to have teachers that develop relationship with one another and are willing to engage in the work together, because it is teachers are very much their classroom and the way they run things and how they lead their kids is very much individualized, and trying to find teachers that mesh in their personalities in that way, it does take a relationship, and it does take time to build those. At the elementary level, we are providing, it will be additional staffing in the sense of we are going to staff a full-time teacher for perhaps not a full ratio of what we typically have in a learning center classroom. But we don't expect it to be significantly more, because again, it's about redistribution more so than a significantly more.
That was what the question was all about, so I get it. Thank you.
Well, I think that looks like all the questions. Yeah, Siri.
I had to find my hand to raise, sorry. So no, actually, thank you very much for the overview. It's great to sort of see what that plan is going out, as this has been talked about for a great deal of time. And actually, as we look at the results, right, special education was always one of those areas that we really wanted to have some impact. And so there's a lot of great opportunity here. So appreciate all of that. As I look at this, you have a pretty ambitious 5-year plan, which is great because there is a sense of urgency behind this, and there is, but at the same time, what are some of the challenges you might see coming out of this, or pitfalls that could hinder or limit your ability to actually implement in this time frame?
Yeah, I'll speak to a few, and I'm sure Shannon can share more. So one is that continuum of knowledge and skills, right? We talked about at the very beginning. Like some of our principals that came and shared from our pilot sites have been working around inclusive practices for years. So Craig Mott, for example, at Twain, has been really just living this and breathing this for many years. Michael Clark, on the other hand, kind of jumped in and has been learning along the way, and he's further along than some principals that maybe just haven't had this be kind of on their radar. So that's one of them. Is really, we have 30 plus elementary schools, each with a principal and an associate principal, and then staff at each of those schools, and everybody's at a different place. So getting people the skills and knowledge based on where they are so that they're comfortable and skilled at providing the supports in schools. We mentioned a number of other things: schedules, the quality of instruction, how do you divvy up the team so that you really are meeting the needs of students. What do you do when you have a really significant challenge in terms of a student's needs, and how do you respond to that as a school rather than it's maybe an individual teacher always looking to a special education teacher? So making sure you have your positive behavior support system set up and your MTSS overall set up. We said people are ready and recognize the value of this, but they also are swimming right now and just making schools operate. And so that can't be understated. It's just like what capacity people have right now. So ideally, we were thinking we were going to have all schools make this shift next year. And part of the reason we're going with a smaller number is identifying some of those challenges and just recognizing the capacity of our principals to prepare, even with, almost a year out. That's been part of it as well. In addition, getting some of the silos we have in our district. So I mentioned all these different departments that all have to be part of this: teaching and learning, intervention, multilingual, student services, equity, even budget office, transportation, all have to be at the table working really tightly together. And so that's a challenge as well. Not that people are unwilling or don't want to, it's just the time and capacity. So there have been lots of things we've been learning along the way that are really informing our efforts and our plan. And there have been tons of challenges, even just working with our partners and those relationships, like what are their expectations and what are our expectations, and how do we make sure that those are melding together? And so those are just a few. Shannon, I don't know if there's some others that you want to share.
It's not nice, Siri, to make me talk about things that keep me up at night. It is a challenging path, and it is because when you look around you, you don't see a huge number of districts doing this work. And so what that tells me is it's hard, and it's not just skill set, it's mindset. It's not just mindset of general ed teachers or principals, it's special ed teachers who see their identity as a learning center teacher, and that's their skill set and their knowledge base and their experience. And when I ask them to shift practice to serve kids with less significant disabilities and to serve a continuum of kids, they become anxious and overwhelmed and stressed because they think they can't do that. So teacher feelings of self-confidence and self-efficacy are a big piece of this. I know that there's going to be challenges and hurdles with families who don't understand why there are certain kids in their child's classroom. The irony, of course, is the fact that the kids are the ones who are fine with it. The kids are flexible. They can totally handle it. It's sometimes the adults have a harder time because a lot of us never saw kids with disabilities when we were in school. And so to see them now is jarring for us as adults. We don't have that perspective that kids do where it's just, this is how it works. We've already encountered challenges. We know there will be challenges moving forward. And that's just going to be part of the work.
No, that's great. Thanks. And as our policies state, we are very supportive of the work that's going forward with that component. So that's a fabulous thing. The only other thing that I hope we would do as we go along is we sort of document the financial component that goes through as you speak about extra staff, especially as you look for that second phase. But that also gives us capacity to work with our legislature around special education and what it means to be doing an inclusion model. and the costs potentially associated with it, that we can have that conversation. And I assume some of those would be transitory, right? Just in making that transition, there's costs, and then there's a maintenance piece or operational that is different after that. But I think that's a benefit we could provide, actually, in understanding that and how we go about funding that. So just recognizing it's not just a resource, there is a financial piece. So would expect to see difference in the budget coming forward is what I would say. So
there's also the benefit that the state has a tiered funding model for special education, and so they actually provide a district more funding for children who are in that 80 to 100% LRE than they do for children who are in contained learning programs, which seems counterintuitive, but what they're really doing is they're incentivizing and recognizing that there is additional cost when you have when you are trying to serve kids in general education. So there is a benefit for us financially if we are able to shift kids in their LRE categories.
Wonderful, thanks. All my questions. Excited that the work is going on, and thank you for all you've done and continue to do.
Marcus, yeah, I'm sorry, Eric.
Do you have anything to add?
I had another question.
Yeah, go ahead, Director Stewart.
Okay. I appreciate what Sherry just brought up in respect to the economics of it. My concern isn't so much the economics, but the spacing. As we look at our elbow-to-elbow classrooms, I'm hoping that all this will help benefit that problem. I don't know how, but I think it would have a major impact on it. And if we need to start looking at building a case for if we're a pilot for the rest of the state, maybe we're entitled to have the state help this process a little bit more than they normally would. Just a thought. I'm a rather naive thought, but what the hell. Also, as we're building towards the fuller implementation, I assume there must be a component that's kind of under the skin to be looking at the change in culture of schools' outlook on those kids, quote unquote, those kids. I don't know how many times I overheard that phrase in the hallways and had to control myself and just keep on walking. I know it's difficult for when you start blending classrooms and to try and figure out how to do that. And I'm very appreciative of the fact that you're going to have massive training for it. But as you mentioned, it's not just the kids, it's the parents. And that's where other cultural war will, I think, come in. And I hope that we have a great program built for that. Now, the one question that I initially had was, I thought it's great that you're going to be able to consult with the parents up front, say, do you want your son or daughter to go back to their neighborhood school? And what are the benefits? What are the deficits? So forth. And then have the parents part of that discussion. After the child has moved, after a year, maybe after a semester, and all of a sudden the pieces just aren't coming together, are the parents going to be able to say, hello, can we revisit this? And I don't know what's too soon. I don't know what's too long, but I'm just asking the question.
That's a good question, Mark. I hadn't thought of that. I think just like everything in special education, it's going to be individualized. And if we are seeking to disband programs, then the question is what would they go back to? And I think then the question is why are they struggling? Why do they feel like it's not working or that they want to go back? And is it relationships with other students? Is it relationships with the adults in that former school? And those different factors, are there ways that we can make changes that would help that family? But my commitment is to work with families on each kid's behalf, and so we would probably just navigate it if that came into being.
The only reason it even crossed my mind was all the parents who all of a sudden wanted to shift back to remote school when
Yes.
Corona hit.
Yes.
And I thought, I wonder if that would have the same type of impact on kids when they're put in their neighborhood schools. And that's what put it in my mind. And I'm glad y'all are thinking about it. Thank you.
And well, again, thank you, everyone. It's still a lot of work to do. I mean, I think that the big takeaway is, as we shared at the beginning, by and large, the vast majority of our folks say this is the right thing to do, but they legitimately have the right to say, and I need the support to be able to do it well. And that anxiousness and some of those things we talked about that come out are a result of just not knowing. And it's on us to make sure that those supports are built in. And again, that's part of the reason for a stage-based approach, is to not throw everybody in right away, but to make sure we can provide the supports and build those out and find out what works and what doesn't. So it won't be without bumps. There have been some already, but again, knowing that this is the right thing to do for our kids, we're committed to it and excited. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Sorry, 2 mics I have to turn on. One more piece on this. Our level directors that really are those people that are side by side with our principals on a day-to-day basis are fully supportive of this effort and willing to work with their principals around this implementation because for all of the reasons, there's challenges and emotion that comes with this. And so our level directors are very supportive of this. And so I just wanted to throw that in the room as well, knowing that they're a key piece to the success of this effort as well.
Excellent, thank you. The next item on the agenda is, let's see here, apologies. Oh, the superintendent report. Dr. Holman, do you have a superintendent report tonight?
I do, and a bit of a pathway forward update, as you can imagine. It's been 3 weeks that none of us will ever forget. It has been one of the most intense periods of time with, as you all know, staffing shortages, case rates beyond anything that we had seen yet in this pandemic, with public health also changing their narrative around the response to the pandemic during this time as well. And so it's been highly emotional for families. It's been highly emotional for students. It's been highly emotional for staff as we work through this and try and do right by, at the end of the day, our students, but also making sure that our staff have a safe place to be able to work. And so I say that because I don't know how to say thank you to our staff appropriately, because I can tell you there are days where our staff wonder, is this really worth it? And I just really appreciate that they keep coming back, even in the midst of some of the most challenging times. Missing their planning time because they're, covering for a classroom where there isn't a teacher that day. Day in and day out doing that. Central staff, our teachers on special assignment, have been in classrooms since the beginning of January. We have other staff that have been going out to schools to provide other types of substitute roles. Our administrators have done all of those and above, being in classrooms, providing supervision. And fortunately, I don't know if you looked at the data today, but we're seeing a very rapid decline, just as was predicted. But there's still some battle scars from what's been experienced over the last 2 years, but this last 3 weeks has been phenomenal. And so I just wanted to open with that. I have 2 pieces that I want to share with you tonight. One, I have asked Associate Superintendent Matt Gillingham to share really a COVID response update. You saw the information we shared with parents last week around some of the changes. I just wanted him to put voice to some of those adjustments, because some of those adjustments come with an emotional shift for people as well, because it truly is a change in how we're responding. And so we recognize that, and that's why Matt and his team literally spent an entire week engaged with King County Public Health to ensure that the changes we were making are truly in alignment with public health recommendation and guidance. And then I've asked Assistant Superintendent Sally Askman to provide an update around our emergency staffing committee. Sally led that committee over the last handful of weeks to identify strategies to respond to our staffing shortage, and so she'll provide an update as well. So Matt, I'll hand it over to you to provide our COVID response update.
All right, thank you, Dr. Holman. I also think that this month has required a lot of patience, from our staff, students, families, and our community. I know I've personally felt at times, frustrated by not being able to deliver as quickly, on things, and sometimes it's because honestly I was in a classroom teaching a couple of days this month, and other times that there's the complexity both between changes in guidance and the rapidity with what we were seeing, really wanting to make sure that our team is working closely with public health, and then also to process as a team. And I'll say the way I ended Friday was we had a district leadership team meeting, and I ended with really a note of gratitude. As hard as it has been this month, we've also seen our school leaders come together when I was in our schools to hear teachers covering for each other. And I know it's exhausting. I still remember, just not losing your prep time is significant, and this really, there's a sense of, if everybody's trying to do everything we can to preserve our opportunities for our students to learn in person. And last week, one of the things that we did is we brought together some of our lead nurses. We brought together building leaders. We had our district leadership team, particularly from our health services team and from our risk and safety services team, the two kind of lead groups that have been helping guide us through the pandemic, all come together and walk around and really understand what is it that the Department of Health and Public Health are asking us to do as we move into a stage where they're really saying, what we're trying to do is mitigate the effects of COVID, to continue to create safe environments, but also to really ensure that we're preserving in-person learning. And they'd also presented us with some new strategies. And I think it's not just changes in guidance, it's that there's actual some decisions around shifts in strategy. So as I'm going to go through and talk about, it's still a lot of the same layers of prevention that we've talked about through the entire pandemic. But what our conversations with public health really started to give us some options of looking at is we can be shifting our resources and thinking about how do we engage with different strategies. And it really is going to come around testing. That was one of the key things we've been hearing this month is shifting our kind of the strategy on testing. And, and so that's going to be, that has a couple of dependencies. So I'm going to walk through the kind of those different layers that we talked about in our communication, highlight them, but then also hopefully talk briefly about the some of the strategy choices that hopefully, particularly as testing supply becomes more available, we'll have some greater options here in the near future. Okay. All right, hopefully that's coming up for us all. All right. So we talk about the Department of Health continues to emphasize layered prevention measures. And so I'm going to go through a variety of layered prevention measures that both, we're really focused on trying to support as a district. But I think one of the key things that's really important is recognizing that it really is a community-wide effort. And that's one of the things that we spend a lot of time talking about is really trying to, recognize that we need strong partnerships with our families and with our staffs, and that there's a degree of trust and there's that partnership and the help that we need from everybody in these layers. Department of Health, CDC, Public Health continue to reiterate that vaccination is an important layer of protection. And so we continue to partner with the Seattle Visiting Nurses Association. Last spring, we did a teen mass vaccination clinics. In November, we did pediatric clinics. And just this past weekend, we did boosters, which were available for staff and for our teens. And I believe we administered almost 1,800 doses, booster doses this weekend. And so we're really thankful. I can't say enough. They have to have been absolutely slammed, but we're thankful for them. We're also at a stage where we're working to help support smaller clinics within certain communities across the district that may have struggled to get access to vaccination. Have a couple of vaccination resources here. Vaccines.gov is a really easy way to kind of find out where you can get vaccines near you, and King County has a website around both mass vaccination sites as well. Masking continues to be a requirement of the Department of Health, and we've committed to following the Department of Health guidelines and expectations for schools. So they've reiterated the importance of masking. They actually have talked about the importance of wearing a well-fitted mask. And so we have actually expedited our orders. So we have regular orders throughout the pandemic where we buy the kind of the disposable surgical mask, where we buy KN95s. And so we've accelerated our orders so that we ensure that we have a good supply on hand, and so that for staff or students that are needing additional masks and don't have the ability to provide their own well-fitting masks, that we've got a supply. And we have a distribution system set up to make sure that schools can request additional masks from our warehouse. So, and right now we're in good shape in terms of what we have on hand for masks, and should be getting more in here soon. It continues to be, and important. We need people to stay home when they're sick, and whether that's because there's the flu, there's strep throat, there's a variety of other diseases besides COVID, and so we really do need people to stay home when sick. We appreciate families that are keeping their children home when they're sick. And it's important that if symptoms are lasting longer than 24 hours, that people get tested. And then we need families to notify their school if they test positive. And again, this is another point of appreciation, because I would say our families did a great job of notifying the school, keeping their children home, and making sure that they were not sending their children to school when sick. So hopefully this current wave will abate here soon, but that continues to be important. The Department of Health back on January 7th did adopt guidelines to shorten the period of isolation. So isolation is when somebody is tested positive with COVID. That late December, CDC had changed that guidance, and the Department of Health had actually directed schools not to make that change until they had reviewed it and adopted their guidance. So we did adopt that guidance and are moving forward with that. And again, would have probably liked to have worked through that sooner. But given the staffing shortages we had, many of us were in and out of schools. One of the things that's important is when we make changes like this, even though on the face of it they seem like they may be fairly basic. I said, well, it's just moving from 10 to 5, but wanted to make sure that we have time to process with all of our nurses, all of our health room staff, our administrators, so that that we can make sure we get kids back into school or staff back into school, provided that they don't have a fever, their symptoms have resolved or improving. And so in our message, we did say, because we know that there's a number of students who are out there that this may apply to, that they should contact their school if they think they're eligible to return. Testing is, on one hand, I think one of the most exciting developments and is the area that gives us some new strategies. We have ordered tens of thousands of rapid antigen testing, but the supply chain is not yet up and running to the degree that can provide school districts with that volume of testing. But this is the strategy that we talked with public health, that they were really clear on, that wanting to rely more on testing as a strategy for keeping students in school. And previously our testing model was really designed on a couple of assumptions that, one, vaccination, we're really seeing a lot of breakthrough infections. We had really, kind of a low volume. And so the symptomatic PCR strategy seemed to work for most of fall, particularly knowing that the pediatric vaccination was coming into play. And so now we're moving towards where we anticipate being able to distribute thousands of rapid tests that students will be able to take at home. And that is going to open up some strategies, including a test to stay strategy. Most likely, given the supply chain challenges, that this will be something that we will initially roll out at some schools, and then we'll kind of phase it in over time. And most likely we'll be doing this starting with our larger schools, where having the ability to have testing is going to have an immediate impact. We're also expanding the acceptance. So the Department of Health has now told schools that we can accept a variety of tests, including the at-home tests. And this coincides with at-home tests being available for free to the public. And so we have a couple of websites there. covidtest.gov is from the federal government. People can order 4 rapid tests per household for free. And then covidhometest.org is the state's program. I did mine, put mine in the other day, and Amazon delivered them 2 days later. So there are some testing abilities there. And so for students who are being asked to quarantine and need proof of a test, we've updated the instructions of how they can document their home test if that's what they had access to. Contact tracing. So contact tracing is a very intensive exercise. We really have this investigative approach where you're trying to connect the networks. And one of the challenges we experienced with the high volume of cases, that it was really for some of our schools very challenging to contact trace and to do so in a timely manner. And that I think is really important. We talked about that. That it's really important for us to be able to do this timely, because the whole purpose of contact tracing is to put people on notice. If they're unvaccinated, they're expected to quarantine. And so if we're not getting to those for several days, that's not keeping in line with the strategy. So DOH has given some areas of prioritization. So for schools to focus on those areas. We've also worked to streamline our intake process, even little things. So we used to send out separate letters for vaccinated and unvaccinated. But what that meant is every time we'd have a case, we were running the same process 2 times. And, if a school's getting 1 case a week, that's sufficient, right? Our systems had been built for essentially a low volume of cases. But in a high volume of cases, what that means is it's inefficient, and was backing us up. So a lot of the work that our teams were doing last week was just trying to look at how can we streamline this process. So schools would provide just a single daily notification. We know that we have some families that were kind of using that to track the number of cases. However, every time we send out a notification, it's a manual process that needs to be done by somebody. We've been torn. We've had our communication staff out in buildings helping to keep the buildings open, but then that means that they're not able to provide central support to help with some notifications. So So we kind of worked on, trying to prioritize getting timely notice out. And if we are in the event that we just get a significant number of cases at a school, that we just would let the entire community know that we're receiving a high volume of cases, such that we may not be able to notify everybody as quickly as we would like. I put down this concept of place-based. It's a strategy public health is recommending schools move to. It is dependent upon the test supply. So the idea there is that as you have, if the school has the supply of rapid tests, that you're able to essentially notify like an entire class. And so like at a secondary school, you might notify 6 or 7 classes that there was a positive case with instructions. And then you say, for students that can want to pick up a test, or if they're unvaccinated and they're expected to pick up a test, they can come down to the office, pick up a test, take it home. So as our test supply increases, public health has a couple of strategies that we can use that hopefully will mean that, one, we're helping more rapidly identify any spread, and we're able to keep more students in school. Similar to isolation, we're adopting the quarantine guidelines. So the quarantine guidelines now reduce the length of quarantine to 5 days. But on day 5, somebody that's in quarantine would have to test, and it would have to be negative for them to come back. When they come back, they're expected to wear a mask, really at all times for the next 5 days. And so people who are expected to quarantine are those under 18 who are not fully vaccinated, or those over 18 who have not received their booster, if they're eligible to be boosted. And we've sent, since that mostly applies to our staff, we've also sent to our staff, the CDC has a chart that helps you understand, depending on which initial vaccination you received, whether you're eligible to be boosted or not. And then finally, we share with our community our dashboard. We update our dashboard on a weekly basis because we use the same data that we submit to public health. And so we're providing consistent with public health the data that we're sharing with them. Public health has said that they no longer are interested in collecting close contact numbers, and so that is no longer data we're collecting. And again, part of that is because every one of these processes requires a person to go through and actually tally that. And so one of the things we're working with last week was trying to identify where is the best place for us to put our energies, and wanting to make sure that that's where we have our staff focus. So hopefully this helps the board kind of understand the current strategies that we're engaged with, and certainly as we're working with the Puget Sound ESD. In terms of getting access to the level of testing supplies that we would need to be able to begin implementing some of those other strategies that I mentioned.
Director Carlson?
Oh, thank you for the update, Mr. Gilligan. I just wanted to recap what I heard from you, which is that we still believe that vaccines are effective and safe. We still believe that masks are effective and safe, and we are doing our very best to work with the Department of Health, where the professional people who do this for a living provide us with strong and useful advice on how to do these things. And in light of that statement, I, as a board member, am going to say that I am not going to listen to anybody from the public who's coming to our public comment sessions to try and tell us not to listen to the Department of Health. They're welcome to run against me in 2 years.
Any other questions from Director Gillingham? Director Bleasner?
So I just wanted to clarify one component. You had mentioned that they could do a home test on the test to say are at 5 days. I'm assuming a home test is still allowed for that or not?
Yeah, so and there's so many terms that are tossed around, and so I want to make sure that I've kind of grown to be a stickler on terms because they're so complex, and
Yeah.
so we're expanding what we accept when students are in quarantine, and quarantine refers to when you have been identified as a close contact of someone. And if you are not fully vaccinated, then the Department of Health says you need to quarantine, and you need to quarantine for 5 days, and then you can take a test. At that point on day 5, so we would accept a PCR test, or we would accept a rapid antigen test. And we updated the letters today that would provide a student and their family with the instructions for how they share those test results with us.
Okay, because there is no documentation created from a home test.
That is correct, and that's one
So
of the
it's more
reasons.
a self-attestation that it was taken.
Yeah, and so that's one of the reasons why, and that this is a new part of the Department of Health that allowing for that, particularly given that as a nation, right? That's a coming strategy that we're, I guess, leaning into. And so we needed to figure out what would be the actual mechanism for that. So there was some technical work, and they've got that spelled out in the instructions. And then that also gets back to, we talked a lot about kind of the level of trust for our community, nearly all the positive cases reported to us by families who are, trying to do the right thing and wanting, to look out for the safety of our schools. And so it's really important. We continue to expect that families will, tell us, whether it was positive and they're going to need to stay out for a couple more days, or it's negative, and we'll look forward to having their child back in school.
So I assume that would possibly be true with the PCR test too. If I happen to not have that documentation, we would accept that as well. Okay, thanks.
So just one quick follow-up question on the masks that are actually available for teachers and schools. This is definitely a phase shift where it's important to move to a better quality of mask than the fabric masks, even though the Department of Health hasn't officially mandated that for us yet. Is this something where students who can't afford KN95s can go to the office and ask for one?
Yeah, that's so students, staff, if they need assistance with a mask, they can go to the office, they can ask for one. Each school might have a slightly different process for that in terms of what that looks like at their school. And it's one of the reasons why we went ahead and did, we do orders every couple of months, and we actually just did the next 2 orders because the Department of Health did not specifically say what that mask was. They just said a well-fitted mask. But we wanted to ensure that should more students or staff make requests, that we would have an adequate supply.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you for that presentation. That was very informative. Really appreciate it.
And so I just have one last portion of my superintendent's report, and that's I've asked Assistant Superintendent Sally Askman just to give a brief update around the work that she's led around our emergency staffing process.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Holman. I don't have a beautiful PowerPoint deck for you, but I'm hopefully that this information will be of interest and helpful. So just before the winter break, we did assemble a staffing shortages committee to start work right as soon as we returned from winter break, with the charge to make recommendations to mitigate some of the staffing shortages and challenges by January 14th. The goal of the group was to keep schools open and operating daily and restore access to staff planning time to the extent possible and minimize the frequency of building administrators subbing in classrooms or supervising in the rest of the building. The work group is made up of building administrators, CLT members, human resources staff, and Dr. Ross and myself. And we really were originally focused more on the recently identified high needs days of Monday and Fridays and bookends to the holidays and breaks. But we were surprised when we returned from winter break or during winter break, the Omicron surge was underway. And so on Sunday and Monday, just before, Sunday and then Monday the 3rd, we put in place an emergency staffing protocol that put all of our central office staff, our admin, our certificated and our classified staff in an all hands on deck mode. And that actually was through today. We had it originally just through the 18th of January, but we needed to extend it because the numbers weren't coming down. They weren't working out the way we were originally predicting. At the same time, we added a process that went hand in hand with this emergency protocol where principals could notify the sub-office of a critical shortage. And if it wasn't filled, they would not be able to open their school. So we were able to have our sub-office, and at the time it was just one person. I want to recognize Sam Yuhan, director in human resources, who was just working night, day, weekends, all hours of the night and day, and during the day to make these matches of central office staff to critical shortages in the building. So of course this translates to central office work and services that were paused or reduced, and the realization by the committee that this all hands on deck model is really not sustainable long term. So as we work together, we developed a set of options that, based on the student and staff absence rates going down and the virus outbreak data trend going downward, we were making educated assumptions about need, and we developed options that would mitigate the staffing shortages, and over time, in combination, could be used together to provide some relief to the system. So just to summarize, we actually had 29 different processes and options and tactics, and we went through a process of looking at them. How realistic are they? What is the high impact, low impact, long time to implement, easy to implement? And I'm going to summarize what we landed with, which were 13 strategies, but I'll summarize those down to about 6. So hiring 20 full-time rotating teachers for sub-assignments through the duration of the year. So that seems like, well, yeah, I know, why not? We all know there's a national staffing shortage. So the recruitment pool is smaller, people are less hesitant to apply, but our HR department, again, did a phenomenal job. We have 9 teachers hired since January 3rd when we did the posting, and they're in place and they're being used in the substitute rotation. We have 2 more onboarding and who will be onboarded and ready to substitute this week. And then we have the 9 additional that we're continuing to work to hire. We also are enhancing our efforts to attract and hire classified staff. We've had openings quite a long time, and we're continuing to put efforts into that and enhancing those. We also we needed to add staff to the sub-office through the end of the year, just one person to assist Sam Yuhan, and actually 2 if we're able to find a second one, and they work split shifts. So we have not only coverage in the sub-office and a backup for Sam, but we also are able to be more responsive to the principals in the buildings, because people don't call out for a substitute at an ideal time during the day. They often call out when they find out they're not feeling well or something else happens. So life happens, and in this shortage, we really need to be able to respond to it. So those are in place and working. And then in some cases, another strategy, many staff, both program or specialist staff, working with their buildings, and other staff, classified staff, have been reassigned temporarily to provide coverage or in a classroom or supervision in a critical area in the building, crosswalks, lunchtime, passing time. And also our level directors continue to work with our building principals and assistant principals and often redirect those principals or assistant principals to other buildings of need. Another strategy is we are shifting our staff, our central office staff, away from an all hands on deck approach to a predictable calendar that I'll be releasing the calendar tonight, where we'll be slotting in staff for the remainder of the year on the high days of Monday and Friday. And then we will continue to use a strategy that we've had in place even since November. It's an all-call emergency email that we've grown accustomed to, which is deployed after our sub-office does the sub-assignments, and we have a critical need that we can't fill. We put out an all-call email, and we are always successful with finding someone who can either provide supervision in the building, admin coverage, office staff coverage, or classroom coverage. And then one last tactic that we have deployed, we have central office and at the schools canceled all requests for substitute activities that would require substitutes that aren't absolutely necessary for our children's education. So that is a summary. There's a lot more behind it, but a lot of moving parts. And we made an educated guess based on the data and how things are happening in the buildings that, well, we're going to continue to see the staffing shortages decline and our buildings start to be restored to normalcy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Carlson?
I want to say thank you twice to your team for trying to put fingers in the dike, and to everybody who has made it through this surge. We are on the backside of the Omicron surge. Knock on wood, we won't have the same level of distress that we've had in this last 2 weeks again. But it's incredible to watch the efforts that have gone into just keeping things afloat, keeping the kids moving forward, learning, and I can't say enough to thank everybody in the system for what they have done to get through so that our kids can hopefully get to the end of the year. My son is very distressed about having to go into finals. It's like, why couldn't we just cancel finals? No, that's the thing. We didn't cancel finals, and I am very proud of us for not having to cancel finals. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Sally.
Thank
John, any other, does that conclude your superintendent report for tonight?
That concludes it for this evening. Thank you.
Okay, great. The next item on the agenda is public and community affairs. Director Blazner, do you have anything to report tonight?
I think just a few highlights to pay attention to. So the end of December and January, we have had the opportunity to meet with many of our legislators from the 41st, 45th, 48th, and 1st to discuss our legislative priorities. And we specifically targeted special education and sort of highlighted the inclusion work and the need for funding in that area to be able to go forward. Had a lot of interest in actually being able to do visits and see the work that was going on. So we'll be following through with that. Also, we talked on the mental health and social emotional learning and the need for those efforts going forward. And you'll see some bills in the legislature right now around the prototypical school model that is somewhat addressing that component. And then we talked a lot about the COVID-19 funding and mitigating NA's budget stability. And that has multiple different pieces that are being talked about: the enrollment stability, levy stabilization, along with transportation funding. They were all very receptive and great, and we'll continue to have conversation with them over time as we go forward and provide information as needed. The legislative session did start as of early this month, and they are quickly moving through things. Simple majority was already brought forward at the House and the Senate, if I remember correctly. Dr. Holman was able to testify. We also had a PTSA member who was doing it for PTA testifying as well, Melissa Stone. in support of the simple majority bill and the challenges. So unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to get legs this session is what they're saying. So it still matters that we continue to talk about it. And the capital budget is always interesting to look at as well. So that's another component. The only third thing I just want to bring up to make sure you're all aware is WASDA's legislative conference is Sunday, January 30th. It's going to be virtual from 1 to 5. And then they do advocacy on the Hill. So they're already arranging for those meetings with our legislators. And so ideally, this is a time to partner with some of our surrounding districts and to be able to speak directly to legislator about some of the public education issues and public health at this point in time surrounding these components. So it's a great opportunity if you haven't had a chance, if you have questions, I'm happy to answer any of those. Teresa Harding can help set up registration for it to make sure that's taken care of. But it is coming up, and I would highly encourage all of you to attend at least the virtual piece 1 to 5, and then you can always attend the ones with our legislators at different times. And that's it. We'll continue to be doing the legislative work and working with our legislators. If you're interested in any bills, there's lots of stuff on WASDA. I'm happy to direct anything where you need to go to get more information if you have questions as well. That's it.
Thank you, Director Bluesner. Anyone else with anything else to report tonight for Public and Community Affairs? Okay, the next item on the agenda is board member comments, and I'm actually going to go first because there's something I need to bring forward tonight. Our board has historically had a member of the board serving as I don't actually know what the title is, a director or a member of the Eastside Human Services Forum. I will just briefly read aloud. So the Eastside Human Services Forum is a group of elected officials in East King County that meets regularly to advocate for shared interests around human services in Eastside King County. Director Sage had previously served as our representative to that forum. They are looking for another, and Director Bluesner did as well?
I served prior for about the 4 years prior to that.
Beautiful. I didn't mean, I meant no erasure there.
No, it's more if there's questions around it and you're interested to know what they do, I can help to answer those.
Excellent. And they have reached out asking if we have a new member who would like to fill that position. And so we, I guess I'm throwing it out there. Who is interested?
If I believe the board policy is this is appointed by the president, if I remember correctly on how our committees were done, I'd have to go look at the committee policy.
Thank you, Director Bluesner. Well, I will still, my question stands of who is interested, and I will now just double check our policies as to how this position will be filled. Thank you. Director Stewart, I see your hand raised. You are interested. Is anyone else interested in serving?
Could you give more information about what the position entails?
Director Bluesner, are you able to do that, please, while I pull up our policy?
I can. So the Eastside Human Services Forum is made up of different electeds from cities as well as from school boards, and then also from some of the private nonprofits, as well as some of the health field as well. And so their whole focus is really speaking about human services needs here on the East Side and making sure that voice gets heard that way. So this position is actually, they have 2 positions on the board reserved for school districts and directors on this side. So I'm not sure. I believe Issaquah is the other school district currently on the Eastside Human Services Forum, and then Lake Washington has been there consistently, at least since I've been on the board. And so it's a good opportunity to sort of see the broader human services and talk about how education fits into that, and be able to help work some of that context in a broader sense. So it's a great opportunity to be able to really advocate at a larger regional level within the setting on human services much more broadly than education, but education is such a key component.
Right. Thank you very much.
It's about 1 meeting a month, then they have a committee. I believe they used to meet in the morning at 10 a.m., if I remember correctly. It could have changed by now.
Also useful information. I'm also interested, Eric, or Director LaLiberté.
Hold on, I'm reading. Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Director Blazner. You unsurprisingly correctly recalled our policies. Okay.
Can I ask a silly question?
Please.
And this is for Director Blazner. Do you think that that group would be upset if 2 of us showed up?
Based on the bylaws that they have written, yes. We are a member organization, and they actually have very much assigned seats from a board director. It's like saying somebody can come join us.
All right.
You can join
So I'm going to say I am not interested in doing this. So
Yeah.
I'm out.
So I'm going to appoint Director Stewart to fill the seat for the remainder of whatever the current term is, and then we will revisit at that point. Thank you both for expressing interest. And you know, this actually, the second thing I wanted to say for board comments is this raised to me that I think we've historically, I know that board members have served in these capacities on more of an informal basis, and I think that we probably need to think about formalizing that. So if everyone could, first of all, I think a good starting point would be is if everyone could send me and Dr. Holman, copy Dr. Holman, so that you can help me maintain this list. A list of every community organization that you have served as in sort of a liaison or member or board member capacity, either currently or in the past, and then we'll work to collate that and formalize our process. Dr. Holman?
If you could CC Teresa on that, she'll do a better job of collating that list.
Thank you. Okay, and then I think that's it for now. That's my board comment for tonight. Any other board member comments for tonight?
Yes.
Director Stewart?
Yes, a couple of things. One, as I was driving down Redmond Way yesterday afternoon, I was totally shocked by a line that went around from the middle of the building, down Redmond Way, up Leary for vaccinations at Centro Cultural Mexicano. I hadn't realized they were having an ongoing program for vaccinating members of the community. It was a raging success. They had not only DOH helping them, but they also had FEMA helping them, and it's ongoing. As I learn about others, I'll be very happy to tout their efforts also. But I was extremely pleased with the outcome that they had, and look forward to seeing more of it. And if anyone else is running one, God knows I'd love to hear about it. Second of all, I'd like to thank John. I'd like to thank you and your staff. I know the students and the families and staff and the community members and their leaders are very thankful that you are able to look at this, and they're going to be following this with the issue of Emerson with great interest. I've always felt that the most valuable and least known aspect of leadership is flexibility, and I appreciate it. It's a very key factor in leadership that very few people have, and I applaud you for exercising it. Thank you.
I have additional. Hearing myself twice. I have additional comment tonight that I forgot to. Is anyone else hearing me echo? All right, I'm just going to keep talking through it. Actually, I'm gonna mute you and see if that helps. That felt good. Okay. The first thing is I just want to put everyone's radar. We have following this, we have a closed session and executive session. In addition, we've scheduled an executive session for a week from today at 5 p.m. Hold on, let me make sure I'm not giving bad information. Dr. Holman, do I have that right? 5 p.m. Okay, so there's another executive session set for a week from today at 5 p.m. For the purposes of evaluating Dr. Holman as part of our contract with Dr. Holman. We calls for 2 check-ins before the final summative evaluation. And then in addition, Director Bleasner reminded me that at the conclusion of our self-assessment of ourselves that we had earlier or at the end of last year, there was some additional follow-up that we needed to schedule, and we have not done that yet. So I am going to, we'll probably make sense to unfortunately do that on a weekend morning again sometime in the next month or so. So we'll be working to schedule a meeting with an agenda to finish up that conversation that we started at our own self-assessment. So, and I believe that covers everything. Director Bleasner?
Yeah, did Trisha Lubach with WASDA? She was going to send a summary of that event. Has she had the opportunity to do so?
I have not received it yet. I have on my list to check in with her again.
Okay. I just think that would be beneficial because
yes,
helps to drive it.
That's right. Okay. That is the last item on our agenda. Anything else from any members of the board tonight? Okay, so just a reminder, we have a special board meeting a week from today, 5 p.m. with an executive session for the purposes of reviewing the performance of a public employee. The board will now meet tonight in executive session for the purpose to discuss potential litigation. The board will meet in executive session for 30 minutes. Following the executive session, this meeting will be adjourned and no further action will be taken. The board will now convene into executive session it is 9:23. We'll convene in 10 minutes at 9:33. And there is, I believe, there's a separate link to access that.
Executive or closed?
We are convening into executive session now.
Okay, there's 2 different ones. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, see everyone in 10 minutes.